In this lesson, we'll begin drawing the driveways, sidewalks, and even the medians. All right, so we've got some landscape in place. Let's start working on this site, or let's continue working on this site. So our next step is going to be to draw the driveway that actually goes up this way, but we want to make sure we include our curb cuts and actually call out that dimension a little bit later. So what we'll do is we'll just use a couple of simple lines, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay on this layer here, this 0 layer. So make sure we have the right line weight assigned to that. And it looks like it's got the default. So those thick lines we had earlier when we began the lesson or the course, we're under this default. So we can go ahead and change that. And while we're here, let's change our shrubs as well. So I'm going to change that. We'll see what the trees have. The trees have 0, so we'll change the shrubs to 0 as well. And I'll change this layer to 0 as well. And I'll get out of this window, and now it's just a matter of making sure we're on the right layer and drawing in those elements. So our driveway basically runs from the edge of this column here, turn my ortho back on, down to the street here. And on the other side, we get the same treatment there. It's just right up to the property line. So basically what we need to do, we could draw a line from this point and just bring that down to the street level here as well. So again, the goal of this is to get the infrastructure in place so we know how we enter the site. We make sure all the dimensions are right as far as how the site's engineered. We want to make sure we call out the width of sidewalks, also the median, and there's also going to be a utility line running this way, a water line. So a little bit later we'll make sure we have that. So let's finish up this curb in this driveway here. So what we need to do basically is include the curb cuts according to zoning and regulations like that. So depending on where you are, you know, those dimensions may vary, but we're going to go off of the dimension of 5 feet for curb cuts. And how the curb cuts work basically is you just get yourself a single line, and the curb cut, basically the dimension you're working in is where the curve actually starts. So when you have your curb cut that leads into the driveway, let's say it's 5 feet, so you'll have your where the sidewalk actually goes straight, and in the beginning of that actual turning radius or that curb cut to where it actually hits the driveway is that dimension. It's a little easier if I show it to you. So really quickly what I'll do, just so this makes sense, I'm going to trim out the middle. So I'm going to grab this side of the driveway, this side of the driveway. I'm going to type in trim, and we're going to trim out any extraneous line work here. But we're definitely going to keep our property line here, our main property line, because anything here is going to be, you know, city property. So this could be, you know, utility easements and whatnot, and also sidewalk, which is public property. So, and what we could do now is we'll also do some more trimming. Let's select this line here. Actually, we'll go with this line and this line. Same thing with this one. And we'll trim off this excess line work there as well. So we'll go trim, and we'll get rid of these guys. So now how this reads right now is we could tell that this is a median, and this will be the sidewalk. But we need to include our curb cuts right about there. So here's what we'll do. We'll go to line, and as I mentioned, that 5 foot dimension. So what we'll basically, all we're going to do is go up 5, which is 5 feet this way. We'll do the same thing going this direction, 5 feet going that way. I'm just going to close that out. And what this will allow me to do, it will allow me to precisely draw an arc right where that turning radius begins, or that curb cut. So now I'm just going to choose my arc. We'll go from this point to this point, and I'll just kind of fit that into our area here. And now it's just a matter of trimming. So I'll select this line, trim that off. Don't need that. Don't do any trimming there. But we don't need any of this line work here. So I can get rid of that. And there's an extra line there that we drew, and one there. And we can get rid of the one that was there before. And I'm going to select this, and we're going to trim off this line work. So we'll go trim, and we'll get rid of this line. So now you can see we have our first curb cut that actually comes in to our property. Now, this is a historic home, and the way that these were built, they actually kind of shared this driveway entrance. But how this is set up basically is there'll be another curb cut, but it'll be on this side. approximately the same dimension here will exist here with a curb cut right about there, allowing property owners from this property to use this side of the driveway to actually access their property. And the same thing for this side, so you can actually come into your property on this side. So what's dividing this property, one is the property line, but also a little boundary maybe, or small retaining wall, or something like that, that's basically separating the two properties, and the property owners know exactly what side of this drive is going to be theirs. Now, most of the time, your scenario isn't that complicated, but this is based on a historic area, so these kind of things you'll tend to see. So now we just need to do the curb cut for this property, because it's it's going to be it needs to be visible, it needs to be seen, and it needs to tell the story about how this works. So I'm going to assume that this driveway is pretty large, so we'll actually just draw it directly off of the corner of this building for simplicity reasons. And we're going to take the same approach. So we'll go 5 feet in this direction. And we really don't need to go in this direction, because we already know that that's going to be 5 feet anyway. So really it's just doing this area here. So I'm going to type in 5 feet, enter. So now I'm going to use my arc. So we'll go from this point to that end point, and we'll draw it in like so. And if you wanted to, we could have copied this one over. It'll save us a little bit of time, but I figure we'll learn how to do this. So we'll trim. I'm going to select this line as my cutting edge, and we'll trim that off. We don't need this line work here. I can actually stretch that and snap that into place up there. And we're really not going to need any of this line work as well, so I'll highlight that, type in trim one more time, and we'll just cut off anything we don't need here. And we'll get rid of this line, and I'm going to grab this endpoint. Actually, get rid of that whole line, actually. So perfect. And one more line to adjust will be this one. So things are starting to come to life now, and it looks a little more realistic, and you can actually start to tell what's going on here. So we could probably stand to trim off the line work for this guy here. So I'm going to select this line, and I'm going to type in trim. And we'll get rid of this line here. And if we can't, we'll just explode it. And I'll just grab this line and snap it in place. So now this reads a lot better. So now I know that this is basically entering onto the site. So in the next lesson, we're going to continue working with these curb cuts, but we're going to apply them to what's going on this side as well. And then we'll also do some more hatching for our grass, and a little later on we'll start marking our utilities within our site.